Welcome to the tutorial for the No Beginning Chain Asymmetric Shell Blanket. And this is one of a series of No Beginning Chain blankets that I have available on the blog. And you can see the link to this pattern in the comments for the video. And you can, once you get to the blog, you can also go to my patterns towards the top of the page and see other of these No Beginning Chain blankets. What they are really good for are the really textured bumpy yarns like boucle, homespun, any of the types of yarns that you don't like to look for chain stitches because they become invisible with that type of yarn. Now, for purposes of demonstrating the technique of working the blanket, I'm using a smooth yarn, but when you're actually creating the blanket, you can use as bumpy, crazy a yarn as you want, and it won't matter because you're going to be working into spaces created by chain stitches instead of having to look for the actual stitches of chains or the tops of stitches. And the way we do this is I have you create a series of loops for the foundation of the first row instead of a long chain that then you have to go back and find little chains with your stitches. And we do that with 3 chains and a triple crochet. And the first one I'm going to do, I've got my slip stitch and I'm going to do 3 chains to begin with. And we do have to find that first chain. That's the only one you'll ever have to find. Do a triple crochet into that first chain, and then that's it. Then you're done finding chains. That's the end of it. And we've got our first loop. And we're going to create a row of these loops to work into instead of a big long chain. And for the asymmetric shell blanket, you want an odd number of these. And on the blog, you can see how many you'll need to make what size blanket you want to make. But the asymmetric shell, because it's not a ripple and because it doesn't really pull, you can have a kind of an idea just holding out the loops. Once you've got them made, you can kind of see how wide it's going to be and see if that's how wide you want your blanket to be. So I'm going to do 3 more chains and do another triple. And this time I'm not going to find a chain. I'm just going to work the triple into the space that I made with that first loop. And notice that the triples are on top and the chains are on the bottom, and I worked this triple kind of over the top of that last triple that I made, but I worked it into the space. And I'm going to do 3 more chains, and again I'm yarning over twice because I'm making a triple crochet, and I'm going to put my needle into that big hole that I made with that second loop and complete my triple. Chain 3, yarn over twice, and put my needle into that last loop I made. And I keep working into the last loop that I made. 1, 2, 3, and do a triple into the last loop that I made. So you see how these loops are forming, and I'm holding it where the chain is at the bottom and the triple crochets are going across the top. So far I have 5, and just so that we kind of have something to work with, I'm going to make a couple more so that I have 7 total. I just need to have an odd number for this blanket. Alright, so now I have 7 of these loops, and I'm going to hold it so that the chains are at the bottom and the triple crochets are on the top. And normally with crochet at this point you would turn your work, but we're not. We're going to keep it. We're not turning it. We're going to make our second row just going right across where we are, looking at it just like this. So if you look at your pattern, what you're going to do is you're going to chain 3, and now we're going to work into these loops. And again, we're not turning yet. Do a double crochet into the first of the loops, and that's all we're going to do with our first loop. Now with our second loop, we're going to work an asymmetric shell. And an asymmetric shell is 4 double crochet. There's 1, 2, and notice when I'm working into these loops, because I'm holding it where the triples are at the top, I'm working over the triple crochets. There's 3, 4, and then we're going to chain 2, 1, 2, and double crochet all into that same loop, and that is your first shell. And it's called the asymmetric shell because more stitches on this side than on the other side, with the chain 2 gap in there. Now I'm going to skip this loop, and I'm going to work my next shell into this next loop. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, whoops, double crochets, chain 2, and 1 double crochet. So that's into my 4th loop. Because remember, I did just 1 double crochet in the first one, then I did a shell in the second one, then I skipped the third one, and then I did a shell into the 4th one. And then again, I'm going to skip the next loop, do a shell into the next. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then chain 2, 1, 2, and double crochet. And that's all into that 6th loop. And now I just have 1 loop at the end, and I'm going to do what's a V-stitch basically into that. I'm going to do a double crochet and 1 chain, and then another double crochet. And what that will do is give you a place to work into when you turn. There, of course, are loops across the bottom, and we're going to basically kind of make loops down each of the sides, so the blanket kind of looks consistent with these loops. So that's row 1. We did 3 shells because I only started with 7 chains. And this time we are going to chain and turn just like regular old crochet, and this is now going to be a very standard kind of crochet technique. Now that we've established our first row, we're always going to turn our work. We're going to do 3 chains and turn, and there's our V-stitch, little 1 chain right there, and I'm going to do a double crochet into it. So it's kind of like another little V-stitch there. And now I'm just going to work a shell into each of the chain 2 spaces of these shells going across. I'm going to do 4 double crochets, just like before. So now I'm working into these chain 2 spaces. Whoops. 2, 3, 4, chain 2, boop, boop, chain, double crochet 1. So that's the shell, just like we were working before. But since we turned our work, this shell is going the other direction. This shell is going this direction. So the shells are going to kind of alternate just because you're turning your work and you're always working 4 double crochet, 2 chains, and 1 double crochet. Consistently, row by row, since you're turning your work, they will always alternate. But you don't have to alternate them, they work out that way. So I'm going to work into that chain 2 space of the shell in the prior row and do 4 double crochets. Keep losing it. 3, 4, chain 2, 1 double crochet. So that's another shell. I'm going to go into the chain 2 space of this last shell. Do 4 double crochets, chain 2, and another double crochet. So that's all those shells. I've done a shell in each of the shells going across, and now we're down to this last little loopy thing at the beginning, kind of the V-stitchy looking thing, and it's basically a 3-chain loop that you started with, and we're going to do that V-stitch, which is a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. Now that was row 2, and you just repeat that row over and over and over again until the blanket is the length that you want, and you're done. You just finish it off. And that, it's as simple as that. So again, see the blog for the complete pattern and for sizing and yarn requirements. And thank you for watching the video. Bye.